The term economic growth is used in multiple contexts with different meanings in everyday life. Hi, this is Shweta here, and today I want to talk about what does this really mean and how this understanding can help you make the right decisions in your business in both short term and medium term. So let's first understand what really is economic growth. Now, when people generally talk about economic growth, they are referencing to expansion in the economy. They're talking about the positive output gap. But economic growth really happens when there is an increase in full employment output over a period. So just for the sake of understanding and clarity, I have written the definition here. So expansion is the increase in real GDP over a period, right, of an economy. And economic growth really happens when there is an increase in the full employment output over a period. So now the question really is that what determines an increase in full employment output, okay? So because it is so structurally decided and dependent that the increase in full employment output happens when there is a dramatic change in the population, which can be now deployed, so like a workforce, or it could be, the capital, which is what people generally refer to. So more factories, land, that's what we're talking about. So factories, capital, land, technology, and this, by the way, means long-run aggregate supply because that's what determines the full employment output. So this is technology, and just so that you understand this, that people typically talk about capital in terms of machinery, but capital, especially in today's context, a big one is actually human capital or human skills. So when there is increase in any of these factors or some of these factors, the full employment output of an economy shifts because now they are producing more at that full employment level, and that's when the economic growth happens. An interesting point to note is that economic growth can happen irrespective of where the economy is in its cycle. So let me explain it to you. This is a really important one because if you understand this and see your business in this context, I'm sure you will get the drift, which I'm trying to have here in today's video. So this is the graph, this is time, and this is real GDP, and say this is full employment output. This is the level we are talking about here. So imagine that the full employment output is trending like this, okay, over a period. So there is a gentle increase, but it's kind of flattish over a period in this section. And wherein the economic cycle is kind of moving like this, okay? So economic cycle moves around the full employment level depending on what's happening within the economy. Now, as you would notice here, which is the interesting bit, look at this. So the economy is actually doing well. It's in this expansionary phase. But in this period, the full employment output is flat. So actually, the right way to think is that yes, there is an expansion that's happening, but the full employment output is stagnant, okay? It's flat. So this is quite an interesting point. The other interesting point to notice here is that look at this, that actually, if I look at this time period, say T3 and T4, here the economy is actually in contractionary phase, the way we are right now during pandemic, right? So actually it's declining, but then the full employment output is actually on a slight uplift. So there is actually an economic growth happening while the economy is in a contractionary phase. Now this is fascinating. And we will talk about what that means in business context. But first, I just want you to understand that when you are talking about economic growth, it really means increase in full employment output over a period. Otherwise, these are just expansions and contractions. And recession is 3 quarters of continuous contraction would be then declared as recession. So just looking at this now, what that means, therefore, the thinking process and how people try to come out of this contractionary phase, get into expansionary, and more importantly, ensure that the full employment output is increasing. So there is an economic growth that's happening in the economy. So I'll show you using some other chart just to make this point clearer for you. So if I look at your typical aggregate demand and aggregate supply curves, which determine the output and price and how it's related to the long run aggregate supply, which is related to the full employment level. Okay, so have a look at this. So if I say this is like a beautiful economy, okay, there is this is the price, this is the output. Let's say this is the output, okay, equilibrium, and this is the price. This is your short-run aggregate supply. This is short-run aggregate demand. As price increases, demand goes down and vice versa. And this is long-run aggregate supply. Okay, so this is the level, actually this is the full employment output level, and actually economy is also in equilibrium. So it's matching, it's right here. Now, if you think about it in a very simple way, that because of pandemic, what has really happened? Because of the lockdowns and constraints in moving out and about for both businesses and people, actually the short-run aggregate demand has shifted backward, isn't it? So it has shifted backward, because of which the output has declined, and not just aggregate demand, even aggregate supply curve has shifted backward. Right? Now, it depends on the amount of shifts in these two graphs to understand what will be the final impact on the price. But let's imagine price is slightly kind of gone down here and the output has surely declined. So let's call it P. Yeah, this is the pandemic effect of what has happened in the economy. So if you think about it, there is this output gap. There is a negative output gap, which means we are in this contractionary phase. Okay. Now, obviously, the government is trying to bring the economic cycle back in the expansionary phase, and more importantly, to ensure that this full employment level is not moving back, but actually trying to shift it to, say, to this level, right? Saying, how do we shift our long-run aggregate supply to ensure that there is economic growth happening, maybe not immediately, but at least in the next few years to come, at the same time trying to make sure that there is this no negative output gap and the economy reaches in its equilibrium stage. Now, as I told you, this economic growth, the shift in long-run aggregate supply, happens when these bits are taken care of, more fundamental things. It's not about giving money for people to just go and spend in the economy, but saying, okay, fine, how do we make sure that the businesses are spending more, and spending more as in doing more investments in the economy, or the government spending is actually towards creating that capital? How do we make sure that our human capital is not depreciating, as in the upskilling is happening? So therefore, if you think about the government interventions which are happening at fiscal level, the fiscal policies, yes, there are some tax cuts happening, and potential tax rises, of course, and at the same time they're trying to increase the government spend. Okay, now government spend, if it's happening on infrastructure projects, that does not just help to increase the aggregate demand, but also helps to push the long-run aggregate supply. But not building that investment or capital, but just focusing on immediate spending might shift the aggregate demand curve in short run, but the economic growth, it's still not happening, because that investment in capital, infrastructure, or human skill is not really happening. So if you think about it, what government has done with, for example, 130% reduction for capital investments, they're actually trying to support people, saying that bring forward your capital investments, for businesses, and we will provide you with this kind of tax deduction, which will not just increase the aggregate demand, but also make sure that long-run aggregate supply is moving in the right direction, it's shifting in the right direction. Also, for example, if you now think about it in this context, that all the grants given by government for apprenticeship programs or for upskilling people is again not just to ensure that there is shift in the aggregate demand, but in the short run, but also this human skill is being built, and therefore the long-run aggregate supply curve also moves forward, right? So balancing these two to bring the economy back at the right level, so bring it in the expansionary phase, and also to make sure that this graph is somehow kept on an upward trajectory. Now, this is a really important concept. If you really understand this, you will realize that, therefore, what does that really mean for your business? Now, there are some businesses who have got positively impacted by COVID, right? So they are kind of like in this stage, which is really nice. Wherein quite a few of businesses have been impacted negatively. So they are in the contractionary phase. But whether you are looking at your business in the long run or medium term, when people will look back at your business, this spike, positive or negative, will get normalized, and people will normalize it, because it's a one-off event, right? Which is not in your control. So when over a period someone is looking at this after normalizing 2020 and maybe part of 2021, the question really is that, is the business on solid growth trajectory? So we are talking about medium term and short and long term growth. The economic growth is what we are really talking about. This graph, okay, once I remove the spikes or normalize these movements, how is the long term trend of your business looking? And that will determine the long term asset value of your business. And therefore, when you're thinking about these strategies, of course, right now in short term, you have to manage your cash flow and you have to manage, what's happening in the business. But at the same time, it's allowing you that time to reflect and think, saying, where do I need to make investments, or what do I need to do today to make sure that I'm building capability of my long run business growth, which means what kind of capital investments you're thinking of, how you're upgrading the technology in your business so that you can work faster in a better, more efficient manner. How are you upskilling not just your team, yourself? As a leader, as a manager, as a business owner, how are you upskilling yourself and upskilling your team so they can produce more in the given time, or you can achieve more with lesser resources? Because that will determine how fast you're going to bounce back from your contractionary phase if you're in that, or keep building on the expansionary phase if you are those lucky business owners. That's amazing. So that's what will determine. So And just to give you this, I'm giving you this context so that you understand what's happening in the economy and therefore what will potentially happen in your business. And what do you need to do today to make sure you're taking care of your medium term and long term growth? Because whatever has happened in 2020, it's a spike and it will get normalized, okay, when someone looks back. So the more important thing is, how do we keep growing this long-term business growth trajectory of your business? So get in touch with us, because this is exactly what we are doing with our clients day in and day out, and making sure that they are in the expansionary phase as much as possible in the given times, which they are. And at the same time, we are building the capacity of the business to build on that expansionary and to keep growing in the medium term and long-term business. And also remember to subscribe to the channel to get more relevant and practical information about the business and the strategies which you can deploy to make sure that you're growing in a solid way and increasing the long-term asset value of your business. I hope you found it useful. If yes, please like the video and also jot down your comments. I would love to know where your business is and what are you doing to make sure that it's growing in the medium term and long term. You take care. We'll be in touch with you again very soon.